You all remember Jurassic Park, right? It was a hugely successful book that launched a landmark film in terms of visual effects alone, particularly in the mix of CGI and practical effects on the dinosaurs. Some say it still holds up today, and honestly, I agree. I mentioned this because while it's one of the more well-known movies about dinosaurs, it wasn't the first dinosaur thing ever. I mean, you have the Dinosaurs TV program, you have Theodore Rex, which was the Zootopia before Zootopia, but with dinosaurs in it, and of course Whoopi Goldberg. There's We're Back, a dinosaur movie, Tammy and the T-Rex, starring a young Paul Walker and Denise Richards. I mean, the list goes on, but you get my point. Everyone loves dinosaurs because we don't know a lot about them, even with all the research we've done and museums we've created of natural history and all that. I mean, it's not like aliens, where their entire existence is nebulous at best. Their bones are still around, their fossilized remains and all that. But we're not going to talk about Jurassic Park today. This is a much smaller movie on a much smaller budget and aimed at kids, I think. You'll see what I mean. So, how does Adventures in Dino City approach its dino theme? Is it just using dinosaurs to be unique, or does it have something to say about the dinosaur craze? And, ultimately, I might have mentioned this before, but I do have a thing for cheesy kids films, and Adventure is no different. You have a young kid, Timmy, and his friends Jamie and Mick, geeking out over this dinosaur cartoon. One of them, Jamie, even writing her own fanfiction and presenting it to her friends in the most pre-internet fashion.
It's my story and it's a serious artistic statement, okay?
You know, I've seen many a fanfic writer make this claim about their super serious derivative work, and it never really gets old. Now, it may just be me, but I'm getting a bit of a brony vibe from these kids, since their own casual speech is based on dino-related words.
Gotta be pulling my tail.
You little hornhead. Ultra source of television.
But anyway, the main kid's parents just so happen to have a super advanced laboratory in the basement where they conduct experiments on transmitting objects through a giant television. I think it's supposed to be like teleportation via Skype call. I don't know. Good enough excuse for the kids to mistake it for a home theater system and test out their cartoon dinosaur VHS on it. And then, like many fanfics, they're sucked into the dinosaurs cartoon universe. Antics and adventures ensue. Now, I mentioned this is a cheesy kids movie, and it's definitely got its trashy parts, but for a low-budget film, the puppets and the costumes aren't actually that bad. I know I usually talk about the story or the script first, but the set design and costumes really stuck out to me somehow. It's not Marvel or Sony, but given a $6 to $4 million budget, which would be 7 to 10 in today's economy, I think it works out pretty well. They really make it work for their budget with multiple sets in diverse areas like sandy wastelands, jungles, I think a tar pit. It could just be a really hot springs, because tar would leave black stuff behind on something, whatever. Most TV movies go cheap with their locations, that's all I'm saying. They either stick with a home, a school, or both. But I commend projects that go beyond that. And again, they're not great, but this is low budget we're talking about. And quick note, the little getting sucked into the TV effect is pretty good too. Although the little in-between dimension parts, it reminds me of the gummy ship levels in Kingdom Hearts. It takes too long and was probably there just to pad out the runtime. Now, for music outside of the Dinosaurs cartoon theme, there's really not much in terms of music and score to really talk about. So let's go back to that cartoon theme, actually. Kind of reminds me of the Underdog theme. There's also a weird mix of kind of Western sounding TV theme music, like if you took Cowboys from Moo Mesa and put elements of Walk the Dinosaur in it. I guess it's trying to paint a Wild West setting or feel to it, like this dinosaur universe is a wilderness of strife and survival. It does appear to reflect that during the kids' journey, since they come across all sorts of harsh environments and hostile baddies, mainly the Rockies. I'd say it fits, but now let's get into the meat of it all and stop nibbling at the edges like a frustrated 7-year-old. And I will let you know ahead of time when we get to spoiler territory, but I will also link the movie in the description as well. Now then, a story about living out your own fan fiction. That's what I got from it. Who wouldn't want to live out a story like that themselves, though? If I can get a bit personal. When I was a young reindeer, I didn't have a lot of friends, mainly because I found TV and video games more interesting. The kind that had deers in it, you know, because young reindeer, yeah. Something I did instead of hanging out with friends was daydream about putting myself in their worlds, the TV world, the video game world. Though I never wrote anything down because why would I need to? It was all in my head, no one else I knew was interested. So I made a habit of just keeping to myself and my stories. I don't think it was until the end of middle school that I actually wrote a story. And at that point it wasn't about my cartoons or video games that I still liked, because no one was really into those things the way I was. I did later find a network of nerds to nerd out with, so there is that, but you can see how I can place myself in some of these characters' shoes. Maybe you feel something like I do when a story like this comes along, even though the, oh, I'm suddenly in the TV show I really like, whoa, idea is never really done that well. It's either all fan service, self-insertion, or just badly written for the most part. Because I think there's a misstep on what to actually do with this type of story. Now, Adventures in Dino City takes a pretty standard approach to this, but it's definitely not the best approach in my opinion. It takes a original in-universe property, probably just to avoid copyright infringement, and doesn't really show much about why it's so special to these kids until they actually drop right into the show. And even then, it's probably not handled that well. See, I would have had more than just a really long cartoon intro to convey their affinity for the show. If they had the budget to make this intro, actually, why not do a big confrontation, a fight scene, some exposition or world building you can sneak right in instead of forcing it in, again, right when they dive right in there. Just doesn't seem very well thought out. At least they got the fandom stuff right with these kids. First, there's Timmy, played by the kid that was in Hocus Pocus. He seems like the most excitable type of fan. I mean, his parents even tell him, go outside and stop watching cartoons all day. Where have I heard that before? And yet, he persists like the dinosaur fanatic that he is. He's also the youngest, so he's got the enthusiasm in that respect alone. Jamie is probably a representation of all the female wallflowers that write slash fiction and Mary Sue's and all that. And then Mick is just sort of there along for the ride, though he doesn't mind geeking out every once in a while if he's with a group. Now, I'm sure you can pick out some of your friends or peers, or yourself, that are like these kids. And they also give the kids a lack of self-awareness when it comes to interacting with the cartoon's universe. By that I mean, they refer to events that happen in the show that the characters are probably aware of, but they kind of act like it's still a cartoon right in front of these characters' faces. They'll say something like,
remember the time in episode 12 when the Rockies took over Primeval Park and they rousted old Steg?
And then the actual characters in the show are like,
these guys are wacko!
And the dinosaur characters never truly learn that they're in a fictional setting, and the movie doesn't even play with the idea until one of the kids say something like, oh hey, it's a cartoon, but it's ultimately moot, and doesn't really add to the comedy like it should. Now, well-written stories, I imagine, have the characters react a bit more, try to investigate this a bit more, to the point of having an existential crisis. But in this, it's like they don't even mention it at all, even though they totally do. It's a sadly missed opportunity, but it doesn't stop these characters from having arcs and development. It kind of makes me wonder why they even have this kind of story, if they never really develop the end-universe dinosaurs like they do with the kids. By that I mean the main cast doesn't even fully show up and get together until close to halfway through the actual movie. More on that in spoilers, but overall, they could have done more with the scenario and the characters in the cartoon universe. Now, this is the part of the video where I tell you to pause because you're going to be stepping into spoiler territory. If you want to avoid it, go ahead and pause and go to this section, or just pause and watch the movie. But also, I would like to direct your attention to a link down below of a USA Today article. It's for Hurricane Irma relief and how you can actually help out. There's links to World Vision, UNICEF, GoFundMe campaigns, all sorts of stuff you can do to help out people of Florida and other places that were affected by Irma. Okay, now for spoilers. There is mention that possibly the three dinosaurs, Rex, Tops, and Lori. Lori, by the way, sounds like a discount Billy West doing his Stimpy voice.
Hey, can't we talk this over, guys? I mean, graveyards, Tartown, Rex, and what makes you think he'll help us anyway?
Gosh, Ren, isn't this beautiful? Let's go skinny dipping.
They split up somehow, and I don't know where that mention is, actually. I just have a feeling that there's something else that happened behind the scenes that turned the three heroes into scoundrels, hustlers, and just terrible people. Now, that's something I'd want to see, actually. But this movie just kind of plops us right into the middle of the action with not enough backstory, in my opinion. It could also be that this is just a kid's living through the dinosaurs' origin story, but that wouldn't make sense either because they don't show that at all, that it is an origin story. It just seems like a random episode. And again, some sort of explanation would suffice. Like I'm getting Steven Universe flashbacks here. I do still like the humans' character arcs though, as they ended up being more thought out, basically. Mick and Jamie go through a nice little puberty adult development, I guess you would call it. There are at least two scenes where there's awkward boob touching on both their ends, and I don't know which one is more gross. Now, outside of the booby touchy stuff, Mike takes the normal maturity route and discovers his inner bravery and strength and all that. And Jamie does too, in a way, but also discovers she can sexualize herself in order to get her way, which is a great lesson you should be teaching to girls. Sorry if I'm a little bit feminist, but I don't think it was handled that tastefully. Like, Mick never takes off his shirt or discovers he can sexualize himself in his young teenage body, so why is it always the female characters? That's all I'm saying. Spoilers over. Okay, overall, if you take this movie seriously, then you're really not going to enjoy it. It's just like any other cheesy film. Like the Chuck E. Cheese film I reviewed, its direction is not to make a serious artistic statement, like Jamie would, but it's sort of just there for people to consume like the trashy entertainment that it is. I mean, Adventures in Dino City is paced alright, the acting isn't terrible, the costumes and set designs work pretty well with their budget, but otherwise this is just a dumb and kind of disappointing movie. Like, I'm not mad that it does the decisions that it did, but it's still a little bit disappointing, and they could have taken it far more and make it way more cheesy. But now the more important question comes up. How furry is it? Let's take it through my chance system, a handy rubric I use to break down several aspects of furriness, those being cast, harmony, anthropocentrism, narrative, commonality, and expression. Let's look at cast, or how many story-relevant characters there are that are furry. As you can see, the dinos and cave people live together in relative harmony aside from the Rockies and Mr. Big trying to ravage and ruin the environment, the inner city life, something like that. You also have the human kids that jump right in from another dimension. So I'd say it's a good half and half of humans and anthros. While not the most furry, per se, it does sort of show the difference in humans and dinos and the way they think and do things, I think. I'm not sure if they work with it too much in this movie. Whatever. 2 out of 4. It's a 2 out of 4. Now for harmony, or how natural anthros and furries are to the setting, you have two different perspectives on this. There's the cartoon and the real world's perspective. In the real world, they're obviously all dead, and therefore non-existent except for their bones in the ground and stuff. But in the cartoon, they're about as normal as air to their environment and setting. And since we spend most of our time in the cartoon world, this will give us a higher score on this aspect. So while not a common species, they are naturally integrated into the story, as this is about a cartoon about dinosaurs. So I'd say a 3 out of 4. Moving on to anthropocentrism, or how close these furry characters are to being human. Outside of some of the smaller dinos, the dinosaur characters are pretty much humans in that regard, but in a good way. They don't display or act out any particularly reptilian or dinosaur-esque traits or behaviors outside of the occasional dino-based pun or idiom. And you would think that would take points away from this, but it actually adds to it, since the whole aspect of furry anthropomorphization is to mesh humans and animals together. And anthropocentrism isn't so much about what the animal characters look like, but how human they act and appear. In this case, this is a perfect 4 out of 4. As for narrative, or how key these furries' animal nature is to the narrative, I don't think it is. I don't think the Rockies are particularly discriminatory against the dinosaurs in this flick, or the dinosaurs against the humans. It just happens to be that they're all dinosaurs and cave people. I mean, heck, the big bad villain of this film is a dinosaur himself, controlling the cave goons, so it could really just be an attempt to cash in on the fact that kids like dinosaurs, but then not do anything about the premise. Really, if you could replace the Dino City prehistoric setting and change the species, then you would basically have the same thing. It's not even that tangential, so that leaves us a 0 out of 4. And next we have commonality, or how prevalent furries are outside of the main cast. I mentioned the real world perspective and cartoon perspective thing, but let's just focus on the cartoon right now. I mean, I'm pretty sure animals exist in the real world, like the real world that the movie is set in, but perhaps they couldn't afford or didn't need to have anything but humans to represent the real world setting, so let's go over to Dino City. We don't see too many humans outside of the Rockies, but there are quite a few Rockies roaming around being goons and whatnot, and then the rest is all anthropomorphic dinosaurs. And it seems like a good mix of both. With that half and half there, we have another 2 out of 4. And finally, we have expression, or how furry they actually look. The dinos stand on 2 legs, wear clothing, and do things in a very humanoid way, like perform roundhouse kicks to the face. Now, they kind of look different from the intro cartoon, like the dinosaur cartoon characters look closer to the animal selves than the human selves, but that's probably harder to do with costumes, and that's kind of beside the point. The smaller dinos are more animalistic than the taller ones as well, but there are also more of the taller kind, because all the smaller ones are basically puppets. So I'm going to be judging my score off of what I see more often. Outside of the scales and claws, they're pretty much humanoid, but like kind of half human, half dinosaur kind of a deal. So 2 out of 4. After a quick tally of the score, we have a total of 13 out of a possible 24. Now, I expected more from this film. There's something about me that makes me think they tried to write this like a kid would, because it feels like something a 14-year-old would write, including all the breast fondling. But that doesn't mean I can't enjoy how cheesy and low budget it is. I mean, I know I mentioned this before, but like, hear me out. If you're going to go with a dinosaur story featuring excitable kid and teen characters, then you really do need to go full dino.
Come on, I want to be a part of something.
You are. You always have been. But you have to go back. We'll miss you too. Here, take this. This way you'll always have the key. Go. Go and be a king in your own world.
Adventures in Dinosaur City is flawed and doesn't take its setting or premise as far as it could, but that doesn't mean I still can't laugh at it. This has been Gregor Fossilized Turd Reindeer with How Furry Is It? Stick around for more anthro analysis and antler antics.